David loved old things. Not just any old things, but the kind of stuff that had stories to tell. Every weekend he would walk through different neighborhoods, looking for garage sales, estate sales, and little shops that sold forgotten treasures. His apartment was full of old books, vintage cameras, and pocket watches that still ticked after decades. That Saturday started like any other. Rain was falling softly on the city streets, making everything look shiny and clean. David had finished his morning coffee and decided to explore a part of town he had never visited before. The shops here were different, quieter, older, like they belonged to a different time. He was about to head home when he spotted a small shop squeezed between a bakery and a flower store. The sign above the door was so faded he could barely read. "Hide it." Something about the place called to him. Maybe it was the way the old wooden door creaked when he pushed it open, or how the smell of dust and old leather hit him right away. Inside, the shop was packed with everything you could imagine. Old furniture covered with white sheets, boxes of photographs from decades ago, and glass cases filled with jewelry that sparkled even in the dim light. An elderly woman sat behind the counter, reading a book through thick glasses. "Just looking around," David said with a friendly smile. The woman nodded and went back to her reading. David walked slowly through the narrow aisles, running his fingers along old picture frames and music boxes. He had almost reached the back of the store when something caught his eye. In a small glass case sitting all by itself was a ring unlike anything he had ever seen. The metal looked silver at first glance, but when David moved his head it seemed to change color, sometimes blue, sometimes purple, with hints of green that danced across its surface. The ring had patterns carved into it that looked almost like tiny electronic circuits, but much more elegant and flowing. "Excuse me," David called to the woman. "Could I see this ring?" She looked up from her book and squinted at where he was, pointing. "Oh, that old thing, sure, honey." She shuffled over with a set of keys and opened the case. "Someone left it here months ago and never came back for it. I've been trying to get rid of it ever since." When she placed the ring in David's palm, something strange happened. The metal felt warm, not cold like he expected. The patterns on its surface seemed to move slightly, like water flowing in tiny channels. He blinked hard, thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him. "How much?" he asked, still staring at the ring. $25, the woman said quickly. "Cash only." David almost laughed. $25 for something this unique? He had paid more for coffee that morning. "I'll take it," he said, pulling out his wallet. The woman seemed relieved to make the sale. She wrapped the ring in old tissue paper and handed it to him in a small paper bag. "Enjoy it, dear. It's certainly one of a kind." Back home, David sat at his kitchen table and unwrapped the ring again. In the better light of his apartment, it looked even more mysterious. The patterns seemed to pulse very faintly, like a heartbeat. He held it up to the window, watching how the colors shifted and changed. Without really thinking about it, he slipped the ring onto his right hand. It fit perfectly, like it had been made just for him. The warm feeling spread up his arm, making him feel strangely comfortable and relaxed. That evening, David called his best friend Jake to tell him about his find. "You should see this thing," he said, holding up his hand even though Jake couldn't see him through the phone. "It's like nothing I've ever owned before." "Another one of your weird antique finds?" Jake laughed. "Remember that clock that wouldn't stop chiming at 3 in the morning? This is different," David insisted. "There's something special about it." As he talked, David noticed the ring's patterns were definitely glowing now, very softly, like tiny blue LED lights under the surface. He mentioned it to Jake, who just laughed it off as David's imagination running wild again. After ending the call, David tried to take the ring off to get a better look at it. He twisted it, pulled it, even tried using soap to make it slippery. Nothing worked. The ring wouldn't budge. It wasn't stuck in the usual way, it wasn't too tight or anything like that. It just seemed to belong on his finger now, like it had always been there. "That's weird," he muttered to himself. But he wasn't really worried yet. Sometimes rings got stuck, especially when your hands were warm or swollen. He figured he would try again in the morning when his hands were cooler. That night, David had the most vivid dream of his life. He was standing in a place that seemed to be made entirely of crystal and light. Beautiful music filled the air, not the kind you hear with your ears, but the kind you feel in your heart. In the distance, he could see figures moving gracefully, like dancers made of starlight. One of the figures came closer, and David could see it was a woman, but unlike any woman he had ever seen. Her skin seemed to glow from within, and her eyes were large and kind. She was trying to tell him something, but he couldn't understand the words. They sounded like music more than language. When he woke up, David felt like he had been somewhere real, not just dreaming. The feeling of that crystal place stayed with him as he made his morning coffee. He looked down at the ring, which was still glowing softly in the morning light. "What are you?" he whispered to it. The ring pulsed once, as if it had heard him and was trying to answer. David stared at it for a long moment, then shook his head and got ready for work. He had a busy day ahead at the software company where he worked as a programmer. Maybe keeping busy would help him forget about the strange dream and the ring's mysterious behavior. But as he grabbed his car keys and headed for the door, David couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't even imagine yet. The ring felt heavier on his finger now, not physically, but like it carried the weight of something important, something that was just beginning. David woke up the next morning feeling like he had been hit by a truck. His head was pounding and his body ached in ways he couldn't explain. The dream about the crystal place felt more real than his actual bedroom. He could still hear that strange, beautiful music echoing in his mind. He stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. When he looked in the mirror, something was different. His reflection seemed to shimmer slightly, like he was looking at himself through moving water. David blinked hard and looked again. Normal. Just his regular face staring back at him. "I need more sleep," he muttered. But deep down he knew sleep wasn't the problem. The ring was still glowing softly on his finger. In the morning light streaming through his bathroom window, the blue patterns looked even more like tiny circuits running electrical current. David tried again to pull it off, twisting and turning it every way he could think of. Nothing. It was like the ring had become part of his hand. On his drive to work, weird things started happening. The first traffic light he came to was red, but the moment his car got close, it turned green. David thought it was just good timing. The second light did the same thing. By the fifth light, he was starting to feel uneasy. His phone, which had been at 30% battery when he left home, was now showing 90%. That was impossible. He hadn't plugged it in anywhere. David stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it, when suddenly the display flickered. For just a second, he saw symbols that looked exactly like the patterns on his ring. Then his phone went back to normal. At the office, things got even stranger. David worked for a tech company that made mobile apps. He was good at his job, but he had never been the star programmer. Today was different. Today he looked at code problems that had been bothering his team for weeks, and the solutions just appeared in his mind like magic. "Dude, how did you figure that out so fast?" asked his coworker Ben, watching over David's shoulder as he typed. David honestly didn't know. The answer had just popped into his head. Complete and perfect. "Lucky guess," he said. But that wasn't true at all. By lunchtime, David had solved 3 major problems that had been stumping the entire development team. His boss was so impressed, she asked him to lead the next big project. 6 months ago, David would have been thrilled. Today, he just felt confused and a little scared. During his lunch break, David sat in his car and stared at the ring. The blue glow was definitely getting brighter. As he watched, the patterns seemed to pulse in a rhythm that felt familiar. It took him a moment to realize it was matching his heartbeat. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. That's when he heard it. A voice in his mind, so soft and gentle he almost missed it. It sounded like a woman, but the words weren't in English. They weren't in any language he recognized, but somehow he understood the meaning anyway. She was trying to tell him not to be afraid. David's hands started shaking. He looked around the parking lot to make sure no one was watching, then spoke out loud to the voice in his head. "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice came again, clearer this time. Images flashed in his mind. That crystal place from his dream, the glowing woman. And something else. A feeling of desperate hope mixed with loneliness that made his chest ache. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. David couldn't concentrate on anything except the voice in his head and the growing certainty that his life was spinning completely out of control. Every time he tried to focus on his computer screen, more of those strange symbols would flicker across it for a split second. His coworkers started giving him weird looks, not because he was doing anything obviously strange, but because he was working too well. Problems that should have taken hours to solve were getting fixed in minutes. David was coming up with ideas that were so advanced they seemed to come from the future. "Are you feeling okay?" asked Lisa from the desk next to his. "You seem really intense today." David forced a smile. "Just having a good day, I guess." But it wasn't a good day. It was the most terrifying day of his life. The voice in his head was getting stronger, and with it came emotions that definitely weren't his own. Sadness, hope, love, and something else. A kind of desperate urgency that made him want to do something, anything, to help. The problem was, he had no idea what he was supposed to help with. On the drive home, every electronic device in his car started acting up. The radio kept changing stations by itself, cycling through languages he had never heard before. His GPS showed his location as somewhere in outer space before snapping back to the correct street. The air conditioning turned itself on and off, randomly. When David finally pulled into his driveway, he was exhausted. The voice in his head had been talking to him all afternoon, and even though he couldn't understand most of it, he was starting to pick up emotions and images. The woman, and he was sure now that it was a woman, was trying to explain something important. Something about waiting and searching and finally finding what she had been looking for. Inside his apartment, David collapsed onto his couch and held his head in his hands. The ring was warm against his temple, pulsing with that steady blue light. He was starting to accept that this wasn't going away. Whatever was happening to him, whatever that ring really was, his normal life was over. The voice spoke again, and this time David caught a word he recognized. Not in English, but somehow, he knew what it meant. She had called him by name. Not David, a different name, one that felt ancient and important and somehow more real than anything he had ever been called before. As the sun set outside his window, David realized he wasn't alone in his head anymore. Someone else was in there, with him, someone who had been waiting for him for a very long time. And tomorrow he was going to have to figure out what that meant. David barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, the voice in his head became clearer. It wasn't scary anymore, just incredibly sad. The woman was crying, and her tears felt like they were his own. He could sense her loneliness, her hope, and something else that made his chest tight with emotion he couldn't name. Around 3 a.m, David gave up trying to sleep. He made coffee and sat by his kitchen window, watching the empty street outside. The ring was glowing, brighter now, bright enough to cast blue shadows on the wall. The patterns moved constantly, like living things swimming under the surface of the metal. "I know you're there," he said quietly. "I don't understand what's happening, but I know you're real." The response came immediately, not in words, but in feelings. Gratitude, relief, and something that felt like recognition, as if she had been searching for him specifically, not just anyone who might find the ring. David took a deep breath. "Show me who you are." What happened next changed everything. The world around him seemed to fade away like smoke. His kitchen, his coffee cup, even his own body became transparent. Instead, he found himself standing in that crystal place from his dreams, but this time, it was completely real. He could feel the smooth floor under his feet, smell the sweet air, and hear that beautiful music all around him. The woman was there waiting for him. Up close, she was even more incredible than he had imagined. Her skin had a soft glow, like moonlight on water. Her hair moved as if she was underwater, flowing in waves of silver and blue. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, but filled with such kindness that David felt immediately safe. When she spoke, her voice was like music. David of Earth, I am Kira of the Luminari. I have been waiting for you for so long. Waiting for me? David's voice sounded strange in this place, like it was coming from far away. But I just found the ring by accident. Kira smiled, and her whole face lit up with joy. Nothing happens by accident in the universe. Your spirit called to mine across the stars. The ring was meant to find you just as you were meant to find it. She gestured around them at the crystal city stretching into the distance. Tall spires twisted up toward a sky filled with colors David had never seen before. Other beings moved gracefully through the air, their forms shimmering like Kira's. This is my home, she said. But it is dying, David. My people are dying. True, sadness in her voice made David's heart ache. What's wrong? What's happening to your world? Kira's expression grew serious. We have lived too long in perfection. Our bodies no longer change, no longer grow. We cannot create new life the way we once did. In less than one of your generations, there will be no more Luminari in the universe. David tried to process what she was telling him. But what does that have to do with me, with the ring? The ring is not jewelry, David. It is a bond, a connection between souls that transcends space and time. When you put it on, you became my partner in the ancient way of my people. You became my husband. The word hit David like a physical blow. Husband? But I don't even know you. Kira stepped closer and David could feel warmth radiating from her glowing skin. You know me better than anyone ever has. For 7 days our minds have been connecting. You have felt my emotions, seen my memories. I have learned your heart, your dreams, your fears. This is how the Luminari choose their life partners, through the joining of spirits. David's head was spinning. This is crazy. I'm human. You're whatever you are. How can we be married? The universe is vast, David, and consciousness takes many forms. Love is the one thing that exists the same way everywhere, in every galaxy, every dimension. The ring chose you because your soul and mine are compatible. We can save each other. Save each other from what? Kira's eyes filled with tears that looked like liquid starlight. I told you my people are dying. But you, David, you are dying, too, in a different way. Your spirit has been searching for something your whole life. You collect old things because you are looking for a connection to something greater than yourself. You work with machines because you understand that everything in the universe is connected, even if you don't know why. David wanted to argue, but everything she said felt true. He had always felt like he was looking for something, waiting for something important to happen. The ring is changing you, Kira continued, making you stronger, smarter, more than you were before. But it is also making it possible for us to have children together. Children who will carry the best of both our species into the future. Children? David's voice cracked. You want me to have alien children? Kira laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Half alien children, half human. They will be beautiful, David, and they will carry hope for both our worlds. David looked around at the crystal city, at this impossible place that somehow felt more like home than anywhere he had ever been. He thought about his empty apartment, his lonely weekends, his job that paid well, but meant nothing to him. What, if I say no? He asked quietly. The light in Kira's eyes dimmed. Then you remove the ring and we both return to our old lives. I will fade away with my people and you will go back to searching for something you will never find. The choice is yours, David. It has always been yours. David looked down at the ring on his finger. In this crystal world, it looked different, more like a window than a piece of jewelry. Through it, he could see glimpses of another life. A life filled with purpose, with love, with wonder beyond anything he had ever imagined. How long do I have to decide? Time moves differently here, Kira said softly. In your world, only moments have passed. But David, I need you to know something. I am already falling in love with you, not because of the ring, but because of who you are. Your kindness, your curiosity, your gentle heart. If you choose to stay with me, it will not be a sacrifice. It will be the greatest adventure either of us could ever have." As she spoke, David felt the truth of her words in his chest. This strange, beautiful woman understood him better than anyone ever had, and slowly, he was beginning to understand her too. When David opened his eyes, he was back in his kitchen. The coffee had gone cold and the first rays of morning sun were creeping through his window. But everything felt different now. The conversation with Kira hadn't been a dream. It was as real as the chair he was sitting in. His phone buzzed with a text from his boss asking if he was coming in today. David stared at the message, trying to figure out how to return to his normal life when nothing about it felt normal anymore. How do you go to work and write computer code when you've just been offered a chance to save an entire alien civilization? He called in sick and spent the day walking around the city, trying to clear his head. But everywhere he went, the ring kept pulsing, and Kira's presence grew stronger in his mind. She wasn't pushing him to make a decision. She just existed there quietly, like a warm light in the corner of his thoughts. At a coffee shop downtown, David overheard two women talking about their relationships. One was complaining about her boyfriend who never listened to her, never understood what she was going through. The other was lonely, saying she felt like she would never find someone who truly got her. David touched the ring and felt Kira's immediate response. A wave of understanding and love that was deeper than anything he had ever experienced with another person. She knew his fears about commitment, his worry that he wasn't good enough, his secret dream of being part of something bigger than himself. And she loved him anyway. That evening, David sat in his living room with a notebook, writing down all the reasons why this was crazy. The list was long. Kira was an alien. He barely knew her. Having children with someone from another species was impossible. His family would think he had lost his mind. His friends would never believe him. Then, he started writing down the reasons why it might be the best thing that ever happened to him. This list was shorter, but each item carried more weight. He had never felt understood the way Kira understood him. He had never felt needed for something truly important. He had never felt love that was so pure and honest. The next few days were the hardest of David's life. He went to work but couldn't concentrate. He tried to hang out with friends but felt like he was watching them from behind glass. Everything about his old life seemed small and meaningless compared to what Kira was offering. His friend Jake noticed something was wrong. "You've been acting weird all week," he said over beers on Friday night. "What's going on with you?" David almost told him everything. The words were right there on his tongue. But how do you explain that you're married to an alien princess who needs you to help save her entire species? Jake would have him committed to a mental hospital. Instead, David just said he was thinking about making some big changes in his life. Jake nodded like he understood, but David could tell he was worried. The breakthrough came on Sunday morning. David was making breakfast when he felt a spike of fear from Kira that was so strong it made him drop his coffee mug. Through their connection, he saw flashes of her world, the crystal city but darker now, with fewer of the glowing beings moving through its halls. "What's wrong?" he asked out loud. Kira's voice came clearly into his mind. "We're running out of time faster than we thought. The council has decided that if we cannot find a solution within the next lunar cycle, we will begin the final ceremonies." Final ceremonies? The sadness that flooded through the ring was overwhelming. "We will end our existence with dignity rather than fade away slowly. It is our way." David felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "You're talking about dying, all of you." "Yes, but David, please don't let this pressure your decision. I would rather spend my last days knowing you chose your own path freely than live forever knowing you felt trapped." That's when David realized something important. Kira truly loved him. Not because she needed him to save her people, but because of who he was. She would rather die than force him into something he didn't want. He spent the rest of the day thinking about love. Real love. The kind that puts the other person's happiness above your own survival. His parents had that kind of love. They had been married for 35 years and still held hands when they walked down the street. David had always wondered if he would ever find something like that. Now he had found it, and it was asking him to become something he had never imagined. He could be. That night, David stood in front of his bathroom mirror and really looked at himself. He was 32 years old, single, living alone in an apartment full of other people's forgotten treasures. He was good at his job, but not passionate about it. He had friends, but no one who really knew him. He had a family who loved him, but lived 3,000 miles away. What did he really have to lose? More importantly, what did he have to gain? A partner who understood him completely, a purpose that mattered, children who would be living bridges between two worlds, a love story that would span galaxies. David took off his shirt and looked at how his body had changed over the past week. He was stronger, healthier, more alive than he had been in years. The ring wasn't just connecting him to Kira, it was making him the best version of himself. He closed his eyes and reached out to Kira through their bond. "I have an answer for you." Her presence immediately filled his mind, hopeful, but trying not to expect too much. "I'm scared," David admitted. "I'm terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. I'm more scared of being alone than I am of being with you." The joy that came through the ring was so bright it almost knocked him over. "David, are you saying—" "I'm saying yes. Yes to you, yes to us, yes to whatever comes next. I want to be your husband, Kira. I want to help save your people. I want to see what kind of children we can make together." The ring flared with light so bright it lit up his entire bathroom. Through their connection, David could feel Kira crying tears of relief and happiness. He was crying too, he realized. But for the first time in his life, they were tears of pure joy. 6 months had passed since David said yes to Kira, and his life had become something he never could have imagined. The changes started slowly at first, then picked up speed like a snowball rolling downhill. The morning after he accepted the bond, David woke up feeling different in every possible way. His body was stronger, his mind was clearer, and most importantly, he was never alone. Kira's presence in his thoughts had become as natural as breathing. They could share emotions, memories, even dreams. It was like having a conversation that never ended, and David loved every moment of it. His job at the tech company had taken an unexpected turn. 3 weeks after accepting the bond, David's boss called him into her office with an offer that seemed too good to be true. A new research company had reached out specifically asking for him to join their team. The salary was double what he was making, and the work involved developing communication technologies that sounded like science fiction. "They said they heard about your recent breakthrough with the coding problems," his boss explained. "Apparently, word travels fast in the tech world." David knew better. The luminary had arrived on Earth, not in spaceships that would cause panic, but quietly, setting up what looked like a normal human business. They needed people like David to help bridge the gap between their technology and human understanding. On his first day at the new job, David walked into an office building that looked completely ordinary from the outside. But the moment he stepped through the front doors, he could feel the difference. The air itself seemed to hum with energy, and he noticed that several of his new coworkers had a subtle glow about them, not quite human, but close enough that most people wouldn't notice. His new supervisor was a woman named Luna, who looked to be in her 30s with silver hair and eyes that seemed too wise for her apparent age. When she shook David's hand, he felt a familiar warmth. "Welcome to the family," she said with a knowing smile. "Kira has told us so much about you." The work was incredible. David found himself developing software that could translate thoughts into digital signals, creating interfaces that responded to emotions rather than touch, and building communication networks that could span impossible distances. Every day brought new challenges that pushed the boundaries of what he thought was possible. But the most amazing part was getting to meet other couples like him and Kira. There were 12 humans who had been chosen by Luminary partners, and they had become a tight-knit community. During lunch breaks, they would share stories about their experiences, the challenges of loving someone from another world, and the excitement of being part of something so much bigger than themselves. David learned that each ring had found its way to exactly the right person. There was a teacher in Tokyo whose partner specialized in childhood education, a doctor in London whose bond helped her discover new healing techniques, and an artist in New York whose paintings now seemed to glow with inner light. "We're not just random people," explained Chen, an engineer whose luminary partner was helping him develop clean energy systems. "We were chosen because our souls already had the capacity for this kind of connection. The rings just made it possible." The changes in David's personal life were even more profound. His relationship with Kira deepened every day as the barrier between their minds continued to dissolve. She was becoming more solid in his world, able to project herself into his apartment for hours at a time. He could touch her hand, smell the sweet scent of her hair, and see the way her eyes lit up when she laughed. "Soon," she told him one evening as they sat together on his couch, her translucent form curled against his side. "Soon I'll be able to stay in this form permanently. We're almost ready for the final stage of the bonding." David's family had been surprisingly accepting of his new relationship, even though he couldn't tell them the whole truth. He had introduced Kira as someone he met through work, someone from very far away who was in the process of moving to the city. His mother loved her immediately. "She's perfect for you," his mom had said after a video call where Kira appeared as solid as any human. "I've never seen you this happy." His friends were more puzzled but supportive. Jake kept asking where Kira was from, noting that her accent was unlike anything he had ever heard. David just said she was from a very small, isolated community and changed the subject. The most incredible moment came on a Tuesday evening in October. David was working late at the office when Luna knocked on his door. "It's time," she said simply. In a special room at the back of the building, David found all the human partners gathered around a circle of softly glowing crystals. The Luminari were there too, no longer hiding their true forms. They were beautiful beyond description, beings of pure light and love that made the air itself seem to sing. Kira stepped forward, and for the first time, she was completely solid in his world. She looked exactly as she had in the Crystal City, but now she was here, real, able to exist permanently in his dimension. "The bonding is complete," she said, taking his hands in hers. "We are truly joined now, in both worlds." As she spoke, David felt something new blooming in his chest. Not just love, but creation itself. The potential for new life, for children who would carry the best of both species into the future. 3 months later, David stood in his apartment, their apartment now, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Kira was beside him, her hand resting on her stomach where their first child was growing. The baby would be born with the ability to exist in both worlds, to bridge the gap between human and luminary in ways that were only just beginning to be understood. "Do you ever regret it?" Kira asked softly. "Giving up your old life for this?" David looked around at their home, filled with a mixture of human technology and luminary crystal formations that turned ordinary light into something magical. He thought about his work, which now felt like play because he was helping to save 2 entire civilizations. He thought about the community they had built, the love they shared, and the future they were creating together. "I never had a real life before you," he said, pulling her close. "I just had an existence. This is living." Outside their window, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere among them was Kira's home world, no longer dying, but healing, growing stronger every day as more human luminary children were born. And here on Earth, a new chapter was beginning for both species. David touched the ring that had started it all, still glowing softly on his finger after all these months. He had bought it thinking it was just an interesting piece of old jewelry. Instead, it had given him love, purpose, and a future beyond his wildest dreams. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places.